Hello, everyone. Welcome back or welcome to another episode of Unbalanced with me, Cerys Davage. Today, I'm joined by Olivia Broome. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. It's a lovely morning. I've got my coffee. I'm ready to go. Have you got a brew with you?
Yeah, I've got my coffee as well. So
Perfect. We're ready to
yeah.
go.
Mhm.
I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. You are what looks like an incredible woman, smashing it in the disability sports world. So I'm very excited to dive into that with you today. But first, give us a bit of an intro about yourself. Where are you from, and what do you do?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm Olivia Broome. I'm a GB powerlifter. Who's been to two Paralympic games. And yeah, I'm from Chorley.
Lovely. So up north.
Yeah, no, northern girl.
Love it. You're a GB powerlifter. How did you
Yes.
get into that? That's not
Um,
something like we get taught in schools, I don't think.
no, it's not. Originally, I was a swimmer growing up, and always like I'd always wanted to go to a Paralympics after seeing like London 2012. I think that was where it really sort of I fell in love with sport and being athletic. And I was doing swimming at the time, and it wasn't until my older sister did some volunteer work with UK Sport and their like Discover Your Gold talent ID pathways. So like back then, it used to be UK Sport would reach out to athletes or potential athletes, and you'd go and to like their tryout days. And she came home one day and was like, "Why don't we put Liv up for this and sort of see where that takes her?" And so we filled in all the information, and they came back and they were like kind of said, "You're sort of best suited to either powerlifting, to powerlifting or to table tennis." And I can't play table tennis. I'm terrible at it. But powerlifting was one of those where I hadn't heard of it, and it was very interesting, and sort of I did a bit of research on it, then saw what it entailed. And so we went to the gym, a little while before going down to their tryout day to sort of, have a go and just see. And I was like, "Oh, I think this would be good." And then we went to their tryout day down in Loughborough at the university, and I just fell in love with it that day, really. And yeah, it kind of took off from there.
That sounds pretty cool, and Loughborough is kind of known for its sportiness and its, way of getting people into, the big competitions.
Yeah.
Where did it kind of stem from there?
So it was in 2016 that I found the sport. So I would have been 15 years old, maybe just about to be
Wow.
16. Yeah, so young.
Yeah, that's crazy, and you're my age, right? You're 24?
Yeah, 24. So
Wow, but from such a young age, like, that's absolutely incredible, and I'm sure we'll get into your winnings and your successes, but first of all, tell us a bit about your disability and growing up with it.
yeah, so I've got achondroplasia, which is the short-limbed dwarfism. I'm the only one in my family with it because just the way that the genetics work with it in most cases. But I'm not going to get too sciencey on it on here. Um, Growing up with it, it was strange because I never really sort of felt out of place, especially amongst sort of my like peers, in school and in my family. But it used to be sort of going out into public, was probably a little bit of the harder one just because I'm from a small village and there obviously there's not many cases of dwarfism sort of around me in such a small village. Like you maybe get a couple of the older people. And I think in high school there was probably only 3 of us that had dwarfism. So that was probably the more difficult side of it. But my parents growing up, they never sort of held me back from anything. If I wanted to try it, it was very much a sort of try it and you'll, figure out, if you can do it. or if you can't, they weren't I wasn't coddled, growing up, but I think that's also part of, like, I was the 4th kid at that point, they'd done it all before, but yeah, so, like, growing up, it had its perks, but it wasn't the easiest, I'd say.
Okay, and maybe that's a good thing that you didn't come first and your parents didn't, kind of cradle you in that way. They kind of just let you go and, make the same mistakes that any person would make because we're all human. Um, but yeah, it's always difficult to navigate your own disability, especially in my experience, without any representation around you. And because I wasn't really seeing anything online either, I really didn't have anyone to compare myself to and to know, whether this was normal or whether it was just me or was I just a bit of a freak.
Yeah, and I think yeah, like you said, I think in a place obviously where I'm from, no one really sort of stands out. That and to be that person that does stand out, it's quite daunting at times. And yeah, and growing up, obviously, I was born what 2001, and so there wasn't really a lot of positive representation growing up. I mean, anything that was in you know films or TV shows, it was all a bit jokey and, more for, like, satire, like, I grew up with shows like, like Jackass, for example, and stuff like that, is where a lot of it, it sort of made fun of a lot of the times, and that all obviously changed in sort of 2012 when obviously we had the Paralympics, and there was that sort of more, there was more eyes on disability, and I think obviously now since then, perceptions have changed. You still get a few of the younger kids sort of still in that sort of older mindset, but I think now that I'm older, I can tend to shut that out a lot better than I probably did when I was younger.
I definitely agree that, the representation wasn't like a positive one. And also anything we saw on, disability, any characters with a disability, that was who they were, that was their personality. They weren't a disabled person that had their own career or anything else. They were just a disabled person. So
Yeah.
it wasn't a very positive light in showing that, we can go out there and still have jobs or be parents or just be normal parts of society regardless of our disability. Like that was all there was. So
Yeah,
um
yeah, like like, apparently, I was like, obviously, I was a baby, so I obviously don't remember this, but when my parents told, I think, my grandma that I had dwarfism, it was that sort of like, "Oh, will she be okay?" And mum's like, "She's fine, like, like, she'll be good." And it was like, sort of back then, it was sort of like if you ever said that you had disability, like, no matter your age, it was very much people tended to focus a lot more on that, and they obviously tried to be a bit more like sympathetic, and you just be like, no, like they're having a great time, like they've got like family, they've got an amazing job, like, but a lot of people tended to focus on just that disability.
yeah, and I don't want that to be the focus, I want that to just be like a tiny part of me that, it is something to look out for. I don't want you to ignore it because, that's a whole problem in itself, but just to acknowledge it and not see me just for that, see me for my hobbies and everything else and my contribution to society and, just I'm just like you, but our bodies just work a little bit differently.
Yeah, exactly that. Like, yeah, just yeah, don't put too much emphasis on it. Like, look at the other things that I've done and do, but yeah, still
Mm.
keep it in mind.
Yeah, for sure. Every journey is so unique with a disability, especially with lack of representation.
I'm very fortunate that whilst there wasn't a great amount of representation in high school, there were two students in the years above me that had dwarfism, and so the school that I went to kind of they obviously knew about it. They knew what I might need, um, And so whenever, if there was a problem, like say for example, like I couldn't reach like the whiteboard or something, they'd always put in, steps to ensure that it just made life a little bit easier. And even like in primary school, like, the teachers helped, but also like the rest of the class would like helpful. Like I had to have remember this, like I had to have this like ergonomic chair like growing up in school and at home. And like obviously having to try and move that around, like they're not the easy they weren't the easiest thing to move around. But, like, friends and just, like, other students would always just be like, "No, I'll move it for you. I'll make it easy for you. Just to give you a hand." And that was always, like, nice. But, yeah, I think a lot of, like, the issues were, people just making jokes, especially sort of, that, like, sort of that teenage year, younger than, like, 15, I wanna say. Try and make jokes or, maybe called in names. And I think that was sort of the hard point because I already stood out. I didn't need, more attention on it. And I think growing up, especially in sort of those like very sort of formative years, especially and like sort of when you're going through puberty, and you're way more sort of self-conscious. I think that's what made it hard because, you catch you on a bad day, you kind of like, "I don't want to go out in public now because if that's all that people see and just point out, then I don't want to do that. I just wanna be at home."
It's so nice to hear that, you did have people around you that just helped you without you having to, go out of your way and feel uncomfortable asking and things, because it is very uncomfortable at first, especially advocating for yourself and not only knowing what you need and what adaptations you need, but asking for it. It can be really, really difficult. So knowing that you had people around you in school that just knew, friends that truly just wanted to help you and just carry on. That's really nice to hear. But the comments, I'm not surprised because, especially Britain, I just feel like, the public can just be horrible sometimes. Um, but I guess you want to come out of that stronger. You want to prove a point that, this isn't just who I am. I'm much more than that.
Is it Yeah, definitely. And, like, obviously again, like, obviously now that I'm older, I can tolerate it a bit more, especially, like, obviously around us. It's a lot of it's to do with, like, obviously younger kids, like, you're looking at, like, 5-year-olds. And I had it recently where I was actually in the shop, in the local shop by us, just, like, picking some stuff up. And, there was a dad with his 2 kids, and they like, I think the youngest one probably 5. I think he said that he's 5. And obviously the kid sees me, and he's trying to get his dad's attention, being like, "Dad, look at the girl behind you," sort of thing. And his dad's like, Let's not stare, it's rude." And his dad turns to me and is like, "I'm really sorry." He's only 5. And I said, "No, it's fine," 'cause I'm a little bit more forgiving when it's, really young children because it is that sort of like they've never seen this before, and they're not quite sure like what to do. And, for them it's different when they see someone like me who's an adult but short, So I'm a little bit more forgiving with that. But when it's the older kids, then I'm a bit like, you like, is that like helpful for you? Like, what do you get out of that?
Yeah, it's also like, there's a lot of ignorance there, but I'm like, are your parents not like teaching you that you shouldn't stare?
Yeah.
Do you just not know that like, if you were in my position, like would you
Would
appreciate
you
someone
want that?
staring at you? Maybe not.
Yeah. Like, would you like it if people stared and pointed at you in public? Probably not. Yeah, but no, you're right, and I think in that, I think it's a lot of the British public, I think, because whenever I've gone abroad, like with family and that, I've never run into a lot of the issues that I get here, which is
Mm.
surprising, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's move on to, back to your sports journey and your powerlifting. Obviously, you've been very successful over the past few years in the Commonwealth Games and the Paralympics and things like that. So, what was your first competition and what was that like competing?
My first ever competition with powerlifting was the world champs in 2017. So that was like my first majors, first international, and it was quite daunting actually because at that time what I was 16, I think, and I'm flying out, with just the team, and you're surrounded by sort of these sort of the great like the big names in your sport, and you're performing on sort of the world, a world stage. It's quite scary at that age, and I just remember being so nervous, and obviously that competition being my first, it's quite special because this is what a competition's like. This is how big all the classes are. This is what we need to do, sort of thing. And but I just remember sort of like morning of comp being so nervous that, like, I didn't wanna eat, and my coach is there like, "No, like, eat, Liv, you need to eat." I'm like, "But I don't want to." At the same time, it was my first comp. We weren't expecting, a medal at that. It was more just for the experience. I still remember it being, like, so fun just going out on that stage and just having a good time.
Wow, that's so cool. I'm not a sporty person in the least, and just like hearing about this is like a whole new experience for me. So thank you for kind of walking us through that. I've seen that you have since been a two-time Paralympic medalist, which is absolutely insane. Can you tell us a bit about your experience there? Was that different from, the competitions you've done previously?
Oh, yeah, massively, I think. Tokyo obviously being my first Paralympics. That was a weird one because obviously it was during COVID, and so it wasn't run like a normal games, and the experience from Tokyo to Paris was very different. And I'll get into that. But even then, it was so different from from what I had experienced because not only is it the global stage, but you're surrounded with different athletes. You're in a very sort of high pressure environment. I felt like then I had back in 2017, I was so like very nervous. And again, still had those like same nervous feelings that I'd get, back at my first comp. And I remember on comp day just sort of head down, headphones on, and before Tokyo, we didn't think that I'd medaled. It was very much like just going through the experience of the games. And I was happy with that. And then obviously the games got delayed a year, and me obviously being younger, just stuck to training, got my head down, and got stronger throughout COVID, and started to be able to sort of almost be in the fight for those medals at, like, Euros, World Cups, World Champs, that we were going into Tokyo then, and like, "No, we could challenge for a medal here." And I was very much like, "Yeah, we could, but, like, it's not guaranteed, like, I'm not gonna be, I'm not gonna say that I'm gonna get a medal," and then got a medal. And I just remember, just being like, "Oh my god, I've medaled at my first ever Paralympics." And, like, I was yeah, I think I was over the moon for Tokyo. And then, obviously, going into Paris, very different games again, just because obviously we weren't in lockdown in Paris, so I was able to sort of go out, explore the village a bit more, and you got sort of used to, like, seeing everyone, and, like, we actually had a crowd at those games, which powerlifting never normally gets a crowd because it's one of those smaller sports that no one really, knows about, unless obviously you know someone in there. And I remember walking out for the athlete presentation in Paris and just hearing all these cheers, and I was like, "Oh, there's a lot of people here, like, wow." And I remember coming out from my lift, and there were loads of, like, school kids there, and I remember coming out, like, chalking my hands up, and these kids were, like, leaning over the barriers, just shouting, to get my attention and to just, like, cheer. and hearing the cheers, like, coming up for my, like, for my final lift, having got it, oh, it was incredible. And I think Paris is extra special as well because obviously my family were there, um, and it just made it, really sweet that they got to see it on sort of the biggest stage that we get to compete on. And I have having everyone there was, yeah, it was extra special.
Wow. That sounds unreal. Like, that sounds like such a cool experience and something that you'll carry with you forever, right?
Yeah, definitely, like, I don't think I'll ever forget either of those games.
And cool that you got to experience like both versions of the Paralympics, which is quite rare, maybe looking back. But I'm seeing like the contrast between, people maybe calling you names when you grew up and shouting at you and making fun of you to these people calling your name to cheer you on at the Paralympics. Like those two kind of contrasts is just like maybe a reflection of how far you've come and how proud you must be of representing your community.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really funny because, like, just walking around, especially in the few weeks after Paris, um, I think I was walking up to a friend's, and this woman was with a dog, and she was pulling the dog of it, and she was like, "Oh, are you Olivia Broome?" I was like, "Yeah," and, like, that I was very much like, how do you know me?" And then they were like, "Oh, well, like, well done for the Paralympics, like, you've done us proud." I was like, "Oh, yeah, you'll have seen that." Um, and I was just like, "Oh, like, people have actually, like, watched me," and, like, I started, like, they know, like, they know this now. But, like, yeah, even going into, like, the shop, into the local, like, co-op for us, like, even the people who work there would just be like, "Oh, congratulations, but, like, by the way, like, so proud." And I'm like, "Oh my god," but at the same time, I'm also like, "Oh my god, like, people that, like, now know who I am." That's scary. Being able to represent, my small village here, like, it's a really good feeling.
And so, so deserved, like all that hard work. And you not only got a medal in your first Paralympic Games, but now you're like being recognized on the streets. That's just so, so cool. And I hope you are proud of yourself because I think it's sometimes tough to give ourselves credit, but sounds like such an incredible journey. Are there any misconceptions about having a disability in the sports industry that you think people should know?
I think it kind of sort of, goes back to what we were saying before with that, if you say that you've got a disability, people tend to look at it quite, like, sympathetically. Um, they still put a focus on it, like, she's like, "Oh, like, she's got," like, for me, she's got achondroplasia, but she's lifted double her body weight. And I'm like, the fact that I have achondroplasia isn't part of, like, lifting double body weight. I did that because I've worked hard for that. And I think there is also that misconception that disability limits you, limits what you can do. Um, and well, in some cases, that's true. There are obviously certain disabilities that maybe can't do, certain sports or certain activities just because of, a safety aspect. There are things that, that we can do and that we're still great at.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. And even if that means adapting a certain way, or maybe it's not the way exactly you imagined it, but you have to just keep following your dreams, like you said, bit cringe, but so true.
Yeah. Yeah, like, yeah, exactly, and I think that's sort of the beautiful thing with sport is, and especially para sport, is that it's all, it's adapted to, people's needs. So, like, in powerlifting, obviously, it's a lot of short stature, but sort of lower limb, amputees, wheelchair athletes, and so, like, in that sport, we just do the bench press, whereas obviously normal powerlifting, you have the squat and the deadlift. But they cater it to, to that disability. And I think that is sort of the beautiful thing with sport is that, it's you can adapt it to suit your needs.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, that's very cool to know, and crazy that you're only 24 and you've done so, so much. I know you've also done the Commonwealth Games. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was another exciting one, Birmingham in 22. Yeah, because again, it's another opportunity to, sort of represent your country, your the the town that you're from. Um, and again, another really special one because my parents and my sisters were able to come out and watch. And yeah, like, again, like, first Commonwealth Games, that's just a special, to medal at Tokyo in 21 and then to medal again at another big games, like the Commonwealth Games, um, sort of a year later, and to sort of show that progression, I'm getting stronger, I've still got, years to go. That's I think that's the exciting part. Um, and obviously with Glasgow coming up this year, there's a lot more, eyes on the sport now, I think. It's another opportunity to sort of showcase what you can do, really.
Hmm, very cool. What would you say is like your biggest inspiration when you go out to these games, when you train through this whole journey?
I think I've got a lot of things. I've got a lot of things that sort of motivate me, but I think the sort of the biggest one, obviously now, like, obviously when I was younger, I wanted to be like Ellie Simmons, you know, like she was the one who inspired me growing up, and open my eyes to sort of, oh, like, people with dwarfism can do elite sports. We can go and compete on these stages. Um, and I think now, obviously, that I'm older, I always think back to sort of the, like, younger me, and that, you know, sort of like, this is what she wanted to do. This is where she wanted to be. And it is that sort of like, I want to look back in, however many years when I'm no longer doing the sport, and just look at what I've achieved. Um, so that sort of inspires me and motivates me. And I think my family as well, and my friends, I always want to sort of make them proud. Um, as I'm sure a lot of people do. Um, but I always go out to these comps. I'm like, as long as I've made myself proud, and I've made, those around me proud, then then that's a win for me. You know, even if it's a medal, amazing. But as long as the people important to me are proud of me, then yeah, then that's a win.
And I'm sure you've made yourself and the people in your life very, very proud so far. And I'm saying so far because, you're only 24 and you've already done so, so much and you're absolutely smashing it. And it's so great to see, um, just some further inspiration online showing that, disabled people can do this. We can go out there and just do what we want and chase what our dreams, chase what we really, really want to do and be really good at it at the same time. What else have you got coming up for Olivia Broome?
So what have we got coming up? We've got our Europeans next month, our European Championships, and that sort of kicks off the qualifying period for the LA Games. So that's sort of the immediate one. Obviously, Glasgow Commonwealth Games after that, and Worlds, and that's sort of the sporting side. But as far as, likewise, who knows at that point? Um, who knows what else I've got in future.
I love that. Just go with the flow, you have to leave some room for spontaneity as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, well, other than, like, obviously just buying a house and redoing that, and I mean that's taught me a bit more spontaneity, because who knows what happens with that. Um, but yeah, sort of like in the sporting side of life, yeah, Europeans is next. which is exciting because obviously after a games you get a lot of new athletes coming in, and sort of new names, new faces, and it's kind of it's exciting to see sort of where you stand with a lot with the newer ones coming in.
Mm.
Obviously, people always say like I'm very young. I don't feel young in this sport. I think because I've been doing it for so long, and you get sort of new faces coming in, and you're like you've got like so much progress to make. Jesus.
Okay, maybe you're not the youngest there anymore, but you've still
No,
got, the LA Games coming up, so best of luck for the Europeans.
thank
We'll be
you.
cheering you on and following your journey. Where can we find you on social media?
So you can find me on Instagram at Olivia Broome Powerlifter. That tends to be where I post the most. I don't do the Twitter or the Threads or anything else really.
Yeah, that's fair. Instagram is a good place to be, I'd say. It's the
Yeah,
best.
I like Instagram. Instagram's nice.
To end this episode, I'd love to ask you a question I ask all my interviewees, which is there a piece of advice you would give your younger self or someone else that's maybe struggling with their disability?
I think if there's something that you really want to do, whether it's sport wise or career wise or hobby wise, no matter like what, I think just go for it because you never know what it could entail. For those that are sort of struggling with their disability, I always advocate to find an amazing sort of support group or network that like, and that could be your friends, your family, and like I'm very fortunate that if I have any worries or concerns or I'm having a bad day, I can go to those people and tell them. And I think that's such an important thing to have. So if there's anything that I could say to those is find a great support network and people who care.
Absolutely. It makes such a difference to your quality of life when you've got people around you that just get you and you can lean on them for support. It makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, exactly. Like I like me and my friends, we always make like I like obviously now that I'm older, like I can joke about my disability. And, like, we had it quite recently, actually, like, we were doing up the house, and we were talking about, like, washing machines and drying machines, and one of my friends was like, "Oh, yeah, you could put them on top of each other." I was like, "Well, they'd have to be next to each other, 4'2", can't be." And she's like, "I sometimes forget that you're short." I'm like, "Yep." I'm like, it's wonderful," because he's not that much taller than me, um, but I think that's the nice part with, like, support networks is, like, they sometimes like, while they know that you've got a disability, they'll sometimes forget, and it's kinda like 'cause then it means that that's not your sole personality, it's,
Mm.
they use the other things that you do in the art, which is nice.
Yeah, exactly. I love that though. I love being able to joke with your friends about your disability. It's like it's so funny and it just means that, they're comfortable with it as well. Like they're not, shying away from mentioning it or just playing around with it. So that really helps as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, like, I think, you can if you can have fun with your disability, then it's good, I think.
You're good to go. Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Olivia, for coming onto the podcast. I hope you guys listening enjoyed. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate the podcast 5 stars and to follow the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the video and to subscribe for more episodes. And thank you so much to Cure LGMD2I and Bridge Bio for sponsoring this podcast. Your support means the world to me, so thank you. Thank you, Olivia, again. It's been so, so great to chat with you, and hopefully we won't be strangers now. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I'll be back with you guys with another episode very soon, but until then, have a lovely couple weeks. Bye.